and welcome to the Audacity to Be Happy podcast. I am your host, Michelle Morano-Burke, and today we are having the audacity to be happy about overcoming childhood trauma with Brooke Olivia. Here is some background on this amazing woman. After many years as a successful medical staffing team leader, Brooke felt completely drained and that she was working hard for the money, but not feeling fulfilled at all. Brooke had a passion for health and wellness and always dreamed of having a career that married her passions and her skill set. Brooke walked away from a comfortable, secure job to pursue her passion in the health and wellness industry and is now leading a team towards fulfilling their physical and financial goals. Brooke also realized the importance of creating multiple streams of income as she was no longer getting that steady paycheck from 9 to 5. So Brooke embraced her entrepreneurship by researching many different business opportunities and finding unique opportunities ahead of the curve, which is a gift in and of itself. Mm-hmm. Brooke's greatest joy is to share her wisdom and empower others to free themselves from physical and financial pain. Brooke is such a dynamic and incredible, complex human that it would do injustice to try to give her whole story in one episode. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it into 2 episodes, and we're going to focus today's episode on Brooke's childhood trauma and how that showed up in her life. And then the second episode, we'll dig into that business side of things where she was so brave to walk away from what she knew and what was comfortable to a place where she has passion and freedom and excitement every day that she wakes up instead of that dreading, oh God, 9 to 5. Am I going to get 2 weeks off this year? When can I fit that in? How can I stretch that, right? So we're going to focus that on next episode. But right now, we're going to go to a more sensitive side of things. Talking about childhood trauma and the things that cause the trauma are very difficult to talk about, but the bravery that the women and men that will be on this show have and their desire to help others is what will drive this community to the place where it really needs to be. People need to get more comfortable talking about the things that aren't comfortable to talk about, but they're relative and they do impact people's lives in a really significant way. And if we don't start talking about it out loud to each other and identifying with one another that we have similarities that aren't pretty, we're going to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And that's the definition of insanity. And I'm not going to live in an insane world. I'm going to learn from my mistakes and I'm going to learn from the people around me. And I just feel so blessed that these people are coming to me. Brooke is coming to me. And when I asked Brooke, what's off the table? She was like, nothing. Crystal clear. Nothing's off the table, which was really astonishing to me because I know Brooke and I know how proud she is about who she is and what she's accomplished. But I also know that there's a part of you that's protective, right? You've been through a lot. So let's just dig into this story that's complex. So Brooke is going to tell us a little bit about her childhood trauma. I'm going to ask Brooke to bring us back to that moment as a little girl who wanted that storybook family life, but understood she certainly was not standing in that space. She was standing in a space where it was anything but perfect. I know that story begins with your father and his complex life. If you wouldn't mind, share a little bit about your dad.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Michelle, for that intro. Thank you for having me here. I've seen how far you've come, and I'm so proud of you, and I'm honored to be here sharing my story. And I know Michelle mentioned what was off the table, and I said nothing. And Brooke, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, would never want to talk about this subject, but because of my growth and everything that I've worked on, now I could freely, openly talk about these things, and there is no more of a freeing feeling than being an open book. So back to your question about talking about my childhood trauma and my father. So My father was an amazing man. He was everything that any father, any man in America strived to be. He was an All-American athlete, got a trophy for the #1 quarterback in the state of Florida. I feel like he could have gone all the way to the NFL. He owned a very successful car dealership business with my grandfather, had a beautiful house, worked out, was very charismatic. Everybody loved him. He got along with everybody. I remember he taught me we treat the CEO and the janitor the same way. No matter what your race, what your title, he got along with everybody and everybody loved him. But on the flip side of that, he also had a very addictive personality. He was an addict. He suffered from mental disabilities that stem back to all of the concussions he's had in football. He also was like abusive to not me or my sister, but to the women that he was with. He was almost like a womanizer. And I hate to even like categorize him with these characteristics, but it's the truth. So to me, he was an amazing man, but he had these demons. And so my father actually ended up passing away when I was 12 years old from an overdose. And when I think back to my trauma from my childhood, the main 3 words that pop in my mind is chaos, shame, and perfectionism.
Let's dig into that a little bit. There's so many people, Brooke, who battle those feelings and they have such a huge impact on them. Shame, perfectionism. I actually did a little research and I want to read to you simply the definition and the effects of perfectionism on young children, adolescents, and adults. Perfectionism doesn't discriminate with age at all. Perfectionism drives people to be concerned with achieving unattainable ideas, unrealistic goals that often lead to many forms of adjustment problems such as depression, anxiety, OCD, and very low self-esteem because they never feel like they're good enough. These adjustment problems often lead to, are you ready? Suicidal thoughts, psychological, social problems, and honestly, can destroy people's lives. Just simply feeling like you're never good enough because you have this idolization of, I have to be perfect to be loved. I have to be perfect to be liked. I have to be perfect to be important in society. So tell me a little bit about what you feel Dad battled with having that perfectionism and how that triggered the addiction and these other things that caused your father to live in a place that really tormented him and ultimately took his life.
Yeah. And he was the first of 3 children. So I think he had a lot of pressure from my grandfather to be the best, to take over the family business, to make all the money, to follow in his footsteps. So I don't know this for sure, but the work that I've done as I look at my dad's life, I can almost see as a little boy how he grew into this perfectionism state. Yeah. And because of his sins and his lifestyle and the mistakes that he made, he was so hard on himself.
Yeah.
The perfectionism would tear him apart. He, all the way to working out. I remember him getting into the gym industry and opening a gym in West Palm Beach and working out 2-3 times a week, taking supplements. Probably some of them were illegal, and never being satisfied with his body, always needing to take it to the next level.
Even though he probably looked like perfection to everybody, they probably idolized what he looked like and probably idolized his level of discipline, but in his mind,
exactly,
wasn't good enough.
He could have gone on stage and done a bodybuilding show. I mean, he looked fabulous, but because of that mindset of I'm not good enough, and I think perfectionism can lead down a really dark path of addiction.
Yeah. Because
not being good enough and not being who your brain thinks you should be leads into the shame.
And depression.
And then what do you do to mask all of that?
Self-soothe.
Yep. alcohol, drugs,
Women, whatever.
women,
Distractions, right?
money.
These are all, right.
Yep. And so that's what his life was filled with.
So when you said shame and chaos, I'm just picturing Brooke as a little girl, middle school age, hardest years in my opinion, middle school, early ages of high school. How did that shame and chaos show up in your life, Brooke?
So I remember when my father passed away, I was in 6th grade, and you're 100% right. Being in middle school is the hardest age for girls. You're trying to find yourself. You're coming out of elementary school. You're not really a child anymore, but you're not a teenager yet. And I was so ashamed that my father, A, was an addict, B, was dead, and C, that I came from a divorced family. After he passed, I went to a small little private school, and everybody's family looked so perfect. Nobody really came from divorced families, and everybody's parents were still together, and their parents were still alive. So I thought. And so I remember lying to my friends about how my dad passed away. I would never dare say that he died of a drug overdose or that he had an enlarged heart that caused him to die from the overdose. I made up a story that he had a heart attack and it was unexpected and he passed away, because I feel like I wanted people to either not ask me, or if they did ask me, feel bad for me, like I was a victim.
You wanted some compassion, and you weren't sure anybody would give you compassion if they knew that he had a hand in accelerating his demise, right?
Exactly. Especially being in a private Christian school. That religious guilt on you.
Yeah.
You feel like, oh my gosh.
My dad was a bad guy, and now I have to carry that. Meanwhile, your dad was a hurting man.
Yes.
He wasn't a bad man. He was a man who was hurting. And let's talk about something that I don't even have in my notes, but it's just so important to talk about. So mental health was taboo back then.
Yeah.
We did not talk about depression. We definitely, the word bipolar, I mean, really right now, my brain goes in circles. I mentioned it on the original podcast with myself because I've battled depression and high highs and low lows. And when they called it manic depression, it wasn't like as taboo. But then when they spun it and put this word bipolar on it, which means high highs and low lows, it was the most shameful thing in the world.
Yes.
Right? So if your dad was battling any of those mental health issues,
which he was.
And trust me, if he was a perfectionist, he wasn't going to tell a soul about that. That was going to be his secret, his shame. He was going to push that down and cover it up with alcohol, drugs, and what have you.
Yeah.
So my purpose for this podcast is for us to share the stories, but to put a voice to those who are struggling with any form of mental health that they feel shameful about. Guess what? Bipolar, depressed, all of the different anxiety, everybody's dealing with it. COVID did a lot of damage to us mentally with regard to how to get along again in the world after we were shut down, all these crazy things. But the truth is, we're forced now to address it.
Yeah.
We're not going to sit back quietly and ignore what happened to the kids who had to do school from home and not have any social life for how long. And we got to talk about this. This is no longer a secret.
Yeah.
So sharing your dad's story about his mental health struggles and all of this is so important. Let's get back to what you were talking about with regard to shame and it showing up in a form of lying and creating stories.
Yep.
What else did you experience in high school other than telling the stories to get the attention of?
Yeah.
What is another part of it?
Yeah, so I think after going into those lies and making these stories, then it started to carry on shame for me. So I felt shameful for not being honest and telling the truth. And so I realized once I started to get into high school, I wanted to mask those things. So I got into smoking pot and drinking alcohol and partying with the cool kids and skipping school here and there. And I started to realize that, oh my goodness, I'm going down the same path as my father. I am a great athlete in the newspaper for volleyball, just like he was for football. But here I am getting into pot and stuff to mask my shame for lying about him. But now I'm going down his path, which is how he all started in high school. So that was one piece. Another piece was I remember wanting attention from boys in like middle school and high school because my father wasn't present. Yes, I had a great stepfather at the time, but it wasn't the same as your own biological father. And so I remember now I look back, wanting that attention from boys and wearing the short shorts and hanging out with the boys. And, that also not just like sexual attention, but I got along better with boys than I did women. Yeah. I was like a tomboy, played all the sports. I wasn't about all the drama and the chaos and the gossip that the girls were. And I think that was like my connection with my dad. He never had a boy. And so he would go out in the yard and play football with me, taught me how to play baseball and fish and all those things. And so now I look back and I'm like, wow, I was looking for that man connection through other peers that were of the opposite sex.
Truth is, they probably had no idea why you wanted the attention. Mm-hmm. They just were like, we love Brooke. She's got this great energy. She likes sports and all that. But meanwhile, there is a story behind it, right? There is something. And the companionship from boys who aren't men yet are very different. Yeah. And it does cause issues for young girls.
Yes.
The boys who get attention from the girls who want attention from boys. Mm-hmm. It sounds a little crazy, but listen like to the circle, right? They're not equipped yet because they're not men yet. Mm-hmm. And they misuse that power, not on purpose. Mm-hmm. And they see girl wanting to hang out with boy, they must want attention.
Yeah.
Right? So as much as you were probably friends with them, they all have this puberty feelings about you. Like, look at the pretty girl who knows how to do sports and she's fun. And now there's that pressure behind it. And I see that happening more and more and more nowadays. I raised 4 young girls into womanhood. Everybody's over 25, but I could tell you, I watched the dynamics with each of them, and each of them did have issues with their fathers in their lives. And they definitely showed up in ways that they sought attention from boys, but the boys didn't know how to handle that.
Yeah. And that could be a whole episode in itself.
True statement.
Because then the girls out there breaking hearts and being called names, and they don't want what the boys think that they want, and they just want to be friends, and they just want the attention, and
then you get pressure, and you want to fit in, and you want to be popular, and that it really is quite a cycle. So trust me, we will unpack that story much later in other episodes, but that's the point of this. These conversations are coming natural. Like, I didn't even think of that as well, but we know what it looked like. I grew up without a father. You grew up without a father. Yeah. I know for sure I wanted attention from boys. I still do. It's not a cool thing. I still battle it sometimes, but we get it. It is a lot. Chaos. You mentioned the word chaos.
Yes.
How did you calm yourself from that chaos that ensued? How did you finally say, I can't do this chaos anymore?
Yeah, so they say the brain between the ages of 1 year old and 7 years old is like a sponge. Yeah. And so when I look back at my life from ages 1 to 7, there was so much chaos. Yeah. My mom keeping me from my dad because he relapsed again, and my dad calling and begging that we could come over, and there was so much chaos and back and forth. And I learned to, as a big sister, protect everybody, my little sister, my family around me, but to also hold and bottle everything in.
Yeah.
Because I just wanted to keep the peace. And so as I got older, I learned that I started to see my trends twofold. The chaos of my father was no longer there because he had passed away. So I would create chaos in my life.
Because you were familiar with it.
Because that's what felt comfortable and familiar to me. So I would rebel against my mother, skip school, not study for a test. After playing volleyball for 6 years, travel, decide my senior year I don't want to play anymore. I mean, I would just do things unintentionally. Back then, I didn't know why I was doing them, but now that I'm older and I look back, I'm like, I was creating the chaos in my life. Had a boyfriend and would just break up with him for no reason. Just so many things that I would just naturally do to create the drama and the chaos in my life. So that was one piece of it. Another piece of it was the bottling things in with the chaos. So not talking about things, holding everything in, not talking about my feelings. And that's how I would, internalize the chaos when things would come up.
When did you feel brave enough to start peeling away the layers of this trauma?
It came up in a couple different seasons in my life. The first season that I could think of off the top of my head was my freshman year of college. I'm out of high school, going into the real world, and I realized I didn't want that chaos in that life anymore. So I got into more therapy, even though I went through therapy when my father died in middle school and high school. You're so young and your brain's developing then. I wasn't really processing it. It was just in one year and out the other. So I think once I graduated high school and got into college, that's when I really got into deep peeling back the layers. And I went to a weekend, an intense therapy weekend. It was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It was called TLC, the Living Course. And they did mirror work with me.
What age were you?
I was 20 years old.
Okay.
So mirror work, where you looked at yourself in the eyes and looked at your little girl and talked to your little girl and told them, you're safe, I've got you, we're going to get through this. Anger work, where you get to scream out and get angry about anything in your past that had angered you. They went through all the different emotions. And that weekend alone taught me that you could rewire your brain, and those paradigms that you learned between ages 1 through 7 in your childhood, you do not have to be a victim to them. You have the choice to stay victim and let that make you bitter for the rest of your life, or make you better. And that was the turning point for me.
I want to think about that a little deeper, because I know a lot of people reach out to do these type of things and they think they're a quick fix.
Yeah.
They think they're going to go and magically their whole painful childhood is going to poof because they've done these things. How important was it for you to accept that you're just starting the journey and that you're going to trip up and you're not going to beat yourself up? And if you did, how did you pick yourself back up after that? Because it happens to most people when they come out of these intensive therapy sessions. They make such progress, but it's hard to sustain it.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm still on the journey. I feel like I'll be on that journey for the rest of my life, that you never make it to that end point where you're like, yes, I've made it. Every day you have to work towards healing and bettering yourself and your mindset. And so that weekend was just one layer pulled back. Things came up in my younger adult years that forced me to get back into therapy, getting in a car accident or my first heartbreak, and staying in therapy, continuing to work on myself, going to these weekends was so important, because I want to be the woman that I am today. That you're never going to just go to a weekend or go to a 30-day retreat or getaway, whatever you want to call it, and come out better. You have to constantly work at it every single day. So some of the things that I have incorporated that have worked for me is starting my day with journaling and, dumping my thoughts, prayer and devotion and gratitude to the Lord. My relationship with God is number one. Surrounding myself with people who are also on a journey.
That's
being one of them.
Big one.
So big. And you've seen me evolve over the years. I've born and raised here, have lots of friends, and I've had to kind of separate myself, because you're just like 3 to 5 people that you surround yourself with. And so even family sometimes is hard.
True.
You have to sometimes separate yourself, from family. Not saying that those friends or those family members you have to stay away from forever, but protect your energy. Protecting my energy was number one, and knowing that I need to still work on myself before I could be around you for a long period of time, or every single day, or whatever that looks like for you.
It's a very sensitive topic. making that shift and choosing your peace and happiness over people pleasing?
I'm 35 years old. It took me probably 33, 34 years to accept that.
Well, how about you take that number 35 and you transpose it to 53? Because that's my age.
Yeah.
And I'm deep in it still.
Yeah.
It is a work in progress, but what I can tell you is when you become conscious of it, you won't stop trying every day to work towards that and be okay with the fact that not everybody's going to like your journey. You're going to want to help people get to where you're going because you're starting to feel a way that you haven't felt in your whole life, and it's peaceful. That chaos starts to disappear. And it's really hard to describe why you're peaceful when you don't know how it really is happening, other than you are immersing yourself in your faith. You are surrounding yourself with like-minded people. And yeah, don't roll your eyes. It's a true statement.
Yeah.
Not you, Brooke, roll your eyes, the community, the audience, because you're going to hear a lot of things that sound like they're cliches. Well, cliches come from facts.
Yeah.
Right? People create sayings like feel it to heal it because you have to feel it to heal it.
Yeah.
Right? So I used to be like, oh, cliche. People just roll that off their tongue and it doesn't mean anything until it does.
Yeah. You know what really hit home for me was, I don't know where I saw this quote, or maybe I heard it on a podcast. Somebody saying, do not take advice from somebody that you would not switch lives with.
Yeah.
And here I am talking to all these people that I would not switch lives with and getting advice from them, marital advice, relationship advice, work advice, money advice. And I'm like, I need to level up and get advice from people who are where I want to be.
Yeah. I think there's a fine line between distancing yourself from people that aren't on the same playing field and choosing to still love them, still have them in your life, but not in that mainstream capacity.
Exactly.
And that's hard to navigate at first, but once you do it and you forgive yourself for not people pleasing your way through life anymore, and now you're like, I choose me because my happiness in the end is going to make me a better mother, a better sister, a better wife, a better friend, a better everything. So no matter how uncomfortable this process is, the truth is it's so worth it. We've already gotten quite a few levels into this journey, and because of that, we're starting to see some of the reward that is so worth it. And yes, sometimes it's lonely. Sometimes you feel judged by others. It doesn't hurt the same way the judgment was when we were doing things that may not have been beautiful, but we did them and we got judged on that. But I don't mind being judged for trying to do better. I'm not afraid of being judged because I found my happiness. I understand the audaciousness that it takes to dig into your happy when you're in the middle of chaos or transition. I talked about transitional growth, and what I can tell you, I've seen that in you. I've seen this transitional growth, this transformational growth. You've transitioned and you've transformed into a version of yourself, not somebody else, an elevated version of yourself, a more aware, a more awake version of yourself.
And can we touch on that really quick? That just brought up something, the version of myself. I think when I first started on this journey of being an entrepreneur and personal development and wanting to be better, naturally you look around and you try and be like somebody who maybe has already made it. Just naturally, because you haven't yet. And I think once I let go of that and I just accepted myself for who God made me and stepped into my gifts and my talents and did not care what anybody else thought, that's when I really saw the change.
That's magic. That's just simply magic. I feel that in my bones right now. I can totally relate to that feeling.
Yeah.
So obviously, the name of the podcast is The Audacity to Be Happy. So I'm going to ask a simple question. how does the audacity to be happy lifestyle show up in your daily life? What are the things that you're doing in your daily life that allows your childhood trauma to be something that you've processed and moved out of, and you're moving into this beautiful phase of life with that audacity?
So the first thing that comes to mind with that is, I mentioned before, letting an experience, losing a parent as a young child is very traumatic. You don't understand it, your brain's not developed yet. And when you stay in that bitterness and that victim mode, poor me, it holds you back in life. What allowed me to move forward with the audacity to be happy was saying, I'm not a victim, I'm a victor. And maybe God didn't make this happen, but he allowed it to happen. And this is part of my story. And because of my father passing away when I was younger, I am the woman that I am today. Getting choked up.
It's okay.
I told myself I wasn't going to choke up, but I'm the woman that I am today. I'm resilient. I can make it through anything that life throws at me. I could help others with my story. And I feel like this is my calling, and this is why God maybe allowed this to happen to my life as a child, because I've grown through it. And now I could help other people, and I could show up happy in my life. And so that not being a victim and being a victor is what I choose every single morning when I wake up, to be audaciously happy.
I have to tell you, Victor describes you to the T. Somebody who takes a situation that would take other people down, and you just embody what it is to turn that around and find the things in your life to be grateful for, no longer a victim. It's really quite beautiful, Brooke.
Thank you.
I know you are really like me when it comes to liking your catchphrases and these things that like stay with you, because it's part of the reprogramming of the brain, right?
Yeah.
Having the things on your mind that you can go back to no matter what's going on in your day. So if you can leave the audience with some words of wisdom, what would those be?
Wow, I could think of so many. So off the top of my head, I would say you get to choose how you want to feel every single day. Do you want to feel depressed, sad, taken advantage of, like a victim, depressed, I said that, or do you want to feel happy? Do you want to feel excited? Do you want to feel proud? That is your choice, and no matter what happens in your life, it's up to you on how you want to feel.
Is there something that you do to trigger that happiness? Because when I think of what you're saying, I have to do a physical action.
Yeah.
And mine is going to see the sunrise in the morning.
Yes.
Instantly happy girl. Do you have something like that?
Yes, I do. Starting every single morning with gratitude, whether that's saying everything that I'm grateful for out loud or writing it in a journal. And it could just be waking up another day, the clothes in my closet, my family, being healthy, transitioning my mind to go into the day with everything I have to be grateful for.
Can I tell you something funny? I do something very similar, but mine seems so silly. I literally love my bed and my pillow and my blanket so much. When I wake up and I open my eyes around 6:30 in the morning, I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for this amazing blanket. I love my pillow. This bed's amazing. So I start with, It seems so simple, but I do. It triggers happy thoughts.
There's people in the world who don't have a bed or a pillow or a blanket.
It's a true statement, and we are not aware and pay attention to these things as much as we should, but I love that. You have some more phrases that I know you love. Give me them.
I would say my favorite one when we talk about the story of my father is treating every day like it's your last. Telling your loved ones that you love them. Because when I was that 12-year-old little girl, I was angry at my dad, and I stopped going with him every other weekend. And when he passed away, I was filled with so much guilt for not telling him that I loved him and spending more time with him. So if you're listening to this and you're having a tiff with a relative or a friend or a spouse, just know that tomorrow's never promised.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love is a beautiful thing. It's meant to be shared. You don't keep that to yourself. If you love somebody, you tell them.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Spread it.
Exactly.
I love that. Well, I don't want to leave the audience guessing about what's about to happen next for Brooke and I. What I can tell you is Brooke is going to pour into us again in the upcoming weeks. And we're going to talk about how her audacity showed up in her career and her path to earn income and have a life that's on purpose and not a robotic life anymore. So we are so blessed. I am in complete gratitude right now for the fact that you were able to be here with us today, that you shared from your heart, that the gloves were off. There was nothing that was off limits, because when you speak from your heart, Brooke, you touch lives that you couldn't touch by bottling it up, experiencing it yourself. Some of these traumas are meant for us to share with others, because we live in a world that can feel alone.
Yeah.
And no one wants to feel alone in these things.
And my favorite phrase to that is, your story could be the key to unlock somebody else's cage.
Oh, man. Mic drop.
Boom.
Mic drop. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to tell you what's coming up next. I'll be interviewing people from all walks of life who've gone through significant things, who want to be leaders in their community and lead with their stories. So if you've gone through something in your life that you think needs to be shared and you think you have a really profound message, I'm going to tell you, reach out to me. The next guest that I'm going to be interviewing, I'm going to provide some solutions for some of these traumas that we've talked about. She's a trauma healer, and she does a lot of unique work, and she focuses on healing childhood traumas especially. So her name's Jessica Velasquez, and she's extraordinary, and I can't wait to have her on. But we'll wrap it up by saying this is another episode of The Audacity to Be Happy. Please continue to spread happiness and joy by liking, sharing, leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to your favorite shows, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, you name it. And remember to post your happy photos on social media and hashtag them, hashtag A2BH. And have a wonderful week. Thank you.